Hello, beautiful being. It is David Ault, and I am once again so honored that you are spending a little time here with me for the gathering. Calling this part three of a series where you and I are exploring all things infinite. What does the infinite mean? How do we personalize that? If we call ourselves a spiritual being, we have already agreed to a principle, if you will, that everything is derived from something that we're calling the infinite, the all, infinite intelligence, the immaculate divine design, the thing that unites and creates this oneness, this wholeness. And how is that even relevant or applicable to me and my day-to-day living? Because me, as a human, I am by admission and understanding finite. There are limitations that come with being in a human form in this plane of duality. But if everything is infinite, what does that mean? How do I integrate those two things? And so these sharings, this series is all about trying to do that, to take something that is a concept, some big intellectual idea, and to personalize it so that you can become, number one, excited at the not just the possibility of, but the reality of what is in you and is you, the true you, and also how to work with it. And so part three comes from me again, once again, all week, kind of sitting with what's the application? What's the theme for this week? And what came up was right speech. So in Buddhism, in the Eightfold Path, one of the principles or the lessons in that is something called right speech. And it sounds exactly as it's described. It's taking the power of word, the power of language, and not using that in a finite way. That means to become a gatekeeper of words, the power and the potency that that has with regards to the lawful reciprocity of that power and the energy behind words. And so, no lying, no idle gossip, no using the vehicle of language and word for harsh or divisive speech. And so it's an activity, it's a highly devoted action of honoring the ability to speak, to use language, to use energy in that form, and to not mess it up with finite trappings, defensiveness. So I was trying to find a way to really give you a personal example of how we get caught up in that because we do. So this is kind of the one I've been working with. I want you to imagine that you put on a mask. You put on a mask when you show up for your field of work. So at work, the workplace, the place that is connected to your livelihood. There is a mask that we wear, and from that mask, language comes out of that mask that is very protective of and concerned with our livelihood. We want to preserve it. We want to make sure that we say the right things. We want people to notice us. We want to be liked. And so there is an attachment to and a dependency of external validation, external noticing. We are giving the power of that validation to something out there. And that mask and the mask that we are wearing in the workplace affects the way in which we speak through the mask. We could say there's a mask that we wear in religion or spirituality, the one of our culture, the one of our upbringing. Again, now here is the power of language, the power of word, speech, and it's coming through the mask now that we have put on in order to obey, do right by, follow the rules, or to even avoid something like a hell or a damnation that the religion or the path that we are on is telling us that we have to do in order to not go there, suffering the consequences. And so we want to say all the right things. We want to do all of these things, but that speech again, it's coming through a mask that is fearful, a mask that is we're wearing for survival, and once again, sort of a tribalistic wanting to fit in. And so the speech that's coming through isn't right speech per se. It's coming through the persona again of some type of survival or fitting in, of being worthy of. There is, let's say, a mask that we wear in the family dynamic. Let's say in relationships and intimacy. Let's say that more than anything, we want that. We want to feel that connectivity to another being, and that is a natural thing. And when we have a history of not believing in ourselves, or speech has been used against us to judge us, or we've used speech to judge ourselves, then chances are, if an opportunity to be or explore relationships come up goes another mask. And now the language comes through that mask where we're trying our best to say the right thing. Kind of the old joke with that was, you want to show up and you want to put your best foot forward. And the joke was always, well, eventually they're going to have to see the other foot. Well, eventually they're going to find whether or not the speech that's coming through that mask that we put on is congruent with how we actually are, how we actually live. So is that right speech? No. Again, it's a tailored speech that is coming forth in order to be liked, in order to be accepted. So we've given acceptance and worth to something outside of us once again. You can start to see how many masks now that we are wearing in all different circumstances, in all different subsets of relating to other people, and now start to feel the burden and the weight of trying to keep up with all the masks and all the languaging and all the things that are coming through all of those that don't necessarily line up all across the board, because we're trying to be all these things for all people. And Buddhism and right speech then is kind of like this: no mask. You take all the masks off because there's no need for the mask, because one understands and accepts and allows their I am nature, their pure essence, to be the thing that is always shown, that is forthright, that is presented in every stage, in every arena. And so the speech then that comes out, the right speech that comes from the understanding of one's pure essence, doesn't need to change or alter to fit in. It doesn't need that, because there's no desire to do that, because there's no desire for anything external to validate it. We come into a congruency, a return home, if you will, of our right nature. So with right nature comes right speech. And so that speech is always truthful and kind and gentle and beneficial and timely. It comes from the deepest of wisdom. It's not used recklessly or for showmanship. It is the vehicle for not only inducing harmony, but creating the ripple effect so that more harmony can be felt and established and accepted by others. It's a beautiful thing. That kind of principle within Buddhism, the Eightfold Path of right speech. It's like having guardianship at the portal of the gift of speech, so that nothing pollutes that or gets in the way. Again, what does that have to do with finite and infinite? Well, when when we restrict ourselves and forget that we are pure essence, that's when we go about the task of all the mask collecting. You know, a finite being, someone who is constantly battling restrictions, is always looking for new and shiny and upgraded mask to put on. And we are looking for new and shiny verbiage and language and hot topics and this and that and the other in order to be able to spout through these masks because the task at hand of fitting in is one that perpetuates itself over and over again. It's exhausting, but we keep doing it. When one is in alignment with not contracting, but expanding not in an effort to get something, but expanding into a relinquishing of all the things, the dropping away, expanding into one's true nature, that is in allowing, inviting, and participating with all things infinite. And the infinite needs no mask. So if you want to get an example of how the infinite works through you, you could practice the Buddhist principle of right speech. You could begin to get in touch with, if I was not concerned with being accepted or saying the right thing or being fearful of a consequence that some external power holds over me, how would I speak? How would my directness not have any kind of retaliatory component to it? I don't need to correct anybody. I don't need to remind anybody of my value or importance because the I am that is me knows that. And when I think of examples of that that you might know, um, and let's say that you were raised like I was in traditional Christianity, there is, to me, one of the most beautiful examples of right speech. And that is when Jesus the Christ is uh, on trial with and being interrogated by Pontius Pilate, who is the emperor at the time. The way that I always learned in divinity school was that Pontius Pilate knew that there was no guilt or there was no real breaking the law from this man, Jesus the Christ. But the crowd, his own people, even the Jews of Jesus's own people, and others, rippling out, were so thirsty for some type of vengeance or some type of retaliation. It's that mob mentality that wants to go and relieve themselves of their own suffering for a moment by throwing all of that that retaliation, that thirst for some type of judgment on somebody else. It's the typical torch-bearing mob mentality that you've seen throughout literature and even in cinema. So there was that. And Pontius Pilate, you could say, put on a mask. He put on the mask of being emperor, and it's like, how do I control this crowd? They're hungry, they're thirsty for blood. They want something. They want this person condemned. And so he thought that he could, in this interrogation, I guess maybe trip Jesus the Christ up a little bit. And he said, I have this part of this dialogue, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus' response was, do you say this of your own accord? Or did others say it to you about me? And and Pontius Pilate said, am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priest have delivered you over to me. What have you done? And Jesus' response was so beautiful. It comes from that right speech. He said, "My kingdom." So if he's saying that, are you the king of the Jews? He said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to this situation. But my kingdom is not of this world. And then Pontius Pilate goes, so you are a king? He said, you say that I am a king. But for this purpose, I was born. Born to come into this world to bear witness to truth. Everyone who has this truth and everyone who has ears to listen, hear this. So Jesus is not denying kingship, but what he's educating Pontius Pilate on is a redefinition. He's saying, my kingdom is spiritual, it's not political. And he shifts the focus to truth, indicating that this mission of his life is to reveal divine truth rather than claim any kind of earthly power. And I just have remembered that story and have been fortunate enough to be in circumstances to be able to listen and understand that more deeply, to now connect it to this Buddhist example of right speech. Jesus had no need for a mask. Pontius Pilate had a mask on because he was trying to look good for the masses. He was trying to find a conviction. And Jesus was not going to play that game. And so one of those beautiful things to consider is that is the same kind of offering, that is the same kind of encouragement, is to know, to do whatever you can to stop rejecting and to start expanding. And you could say, how would I ever know how to do that? Well, you start with exactly what we've been talking about in this series. You notice all the things where you want to contract, reject, pull back. And in these little small atomic ways, you begin to experiment with what it means to say yes, with what it means to expand and to look at and to play with the idea that you are not at the mercy of anything. There's nothing external out there, no power that can take away your pure essence. So you practice, you play from that, and you know using right speech that sort of in the Course in Miracles, it says, in my defenselessness, my safety lies. Such a beautiful example of right speech, because you can see the way in which our restrictive energy, the arguments that we are getting into on social media, the immense division of what is happening in our world. The beautiful thing about right speech is that is not sequestered to someone then who goes up onto a mountaintop and is not involved in it. Can you imagine as someone who walks onto the front line of the systemic issue of division and practices right speech, just as Jesus did in this example with Pontius Pilate, that more and more, and you're saying, yeah, but he got crucified. And we still experience and are responsible for our own metaphoric crucifixion all the time. We are experiencing also crucifixion all the time. There is the crucifixion of our own making through restriction. And then there is the metaphoric crucifixion of shedding all that which is weight through our expansion. And so the one that I want to go with, the one that I want to know assuredly that there is no death, that there is nothing out that the outside world could take from me, is the one that is representational energetically of expansion. So this week, if you're so drawn to it, you can begin to practice right speech. Speaking what it is, being very direct, not arrogant. Don't get this confused with arrogance or a being better than or some comeuppance or using this as some tool to correct somebody. It's just speaking and knowing from a solidity of truth that it's not just words when you say all is well. You know that all is well in that realm that is capital T truth. And I'm going to bring that. I'm going to bring that from the realm of the infinite into all of some of this finite mess, not to fix or change or to have any agenda with it, but to bring that presence into it, to almost like flipping on a light switch into that which is dark. And that is a beautiful practice. It's one that I work on continuously. And I trust and I hope that you find it effective and nourishing and powerful for yourself as well. Thank you.